Help give kids an extra life by donating today to help sick and injured children. Link in the description and pinned comment below.
Yeah, Bucks and 6 always. That's for the culture.
And what a culture it is, my friends. Wow, it's been just over a month and it's still setting in that it's actually happened. My team, the Milwaukee Bucks, winning another NBA championship after 50 years of drought. All those seasons ranging from wallowing in the gutter to coming agonizingly close to the promised land. But just like Brandon Jennings predicted all those years ago, the prophecy of Bucks in 6 was always meant to be. I need a brand appropriate way to celebrate, and I think I know just the way. I personally could never get into sports simulation games, mainly because they look too complicated to really gel with the kind of playstyle I have. And it's especially aggravating nowadays to see companies like EA and 2K regurgitate the same crap year after year with nothing more than roster updates and even more egregious microtransactions. If I want to play a sports game, I want something that's a little less complicated and a bit more suited to an arcade gamer like me. And in the 90s, no series did basketball quite like NBA Jam. For those who wanted more action in their sports games, Jam basically dunked on the idea that anything with the NBA name had to be rooted in realism. With fast-paced 2-on-2 gameplay that defied all known laws of physics, Midway's take on the sport made a name for itself in the arcades. So today, I'm going to talk about the history and legacy of the NBA Jam series. Man, what I wouldn't give to be able to play that game on the Jumbotron at the Fiserv Forum. The story actually began in 1989 with a game called Arch Rivals, which was also made by Midway. This was a 2-on-2 basketball game that scrapped the idea of fouls and let you punch opposing players to steal the ball. This game would be the template for what would become NBA Jam. You see, Midway was looking for their next hit after their latest game, Total Carnage, missed the layup in terms of sales. Midway's lead designer and programmer, Mark Turmel, had the idea to make a basketball game similar to Arch Rivals that would appeal to a wider demographic, and had the idea of using digitized graphics to do so. Remember, these were the guys who had made the original Mortal Kombat not too long before. Said digitized graphics for the game were actually done by real amateur basketball players. And what would be the easiest way to achieve a broader appeal? Brand recognition, of course! Midway was able to obtain a license from the NBA, with the deal being $100 per unit sold. It actually took 2 free throws before the suits of the league were convinced. The original pitch was much more ambitious than what we eventually got. Midway wanted to do a lot of things that were eventually cut, like different camera angles, coaches' tips, and instant replays. Second time was a charm though, and what we did get was released in arcades in America in April of 1993, with home ports following a year later. The game utilized Midway's T-Unit arcade board, which also hosted the first 2 Mortal Kombat games and an unreleased prototype of a Judge Dredd game?
You betray the law!
As I said earlier, NBA Jam is built on the formula of Arch Rivals, being a 2-on-2 basketball game that's more stylized than realistic. You have 3 buttons, one for shooting and blocking, one for passing and stealing, and a turbo button which increases your speed and power as long as the meter lasts. Being a 4-player game, you control only one member on your team, but if your partner is an AI, you can give them the okay to take a shot. Quarters are 3 minutes in length, so you're not around the machine for hours, and there are no fouls, free throws, or violations, except for goaltending and shot clock violations. The exaggerated style of play was one of the defining features of the game. You could be nearly as aggressive on defense as you wanted, including straight up shoving your opponents to take the ball from them. Players on offense could jump like they were on the moon and deliver backboard-shattering dunks that you'd otherwise need a trampoline to even come close to. This was especially true when a player was on fire. A player could catch fire by sinking 3 baskets in a row, and while they were on fire, they had an unlimited turbo meter and jacked up accuracy. The effect lasted until the player hit 4 more in a row, or the other team scored. All of this was accompanied by the over-the-top play-by-play of Tim Kitzrow. His voice clips were inspired by Marv Albert, who was the voice of the Knicks at the time. As a result, many of his quips found their way into popular culture.
BOOM-SHAKA-LAKA!
Unlike arch rivals who used OCs from random teams, this was an official NBA licensed game with official NBA teams and players. The rosters for the arcade version were based on the 1992-93 NBA season. You know, back when Michael Jordan and the Bulls were asserting their dominance over the sport and Milwaukee was a joke. Seriously, who even are these cluster bucks? Jordan himself, however, was noticeably absent from the game. The reason for this comes down to ownership rights. Being the uber star that he was, Jordan and not the NBA owned the rights to his own name and likeness, and I can imagine making a deal with him would have cost Midway more than it was worth. An interesting thing about the game is that cabinets had a memory storage for local player accounts. By entering your name and birth date, you could start an account at that machine to save your progress, a necessity if you wanted to reach the ending by beating every team in the game. Yep, this game took the typical fighting game arcade ladder to its logical extreme. And it wasn't cheap. Jam didn't charge by the game, it charged by the quarter. So the standard at the time was 2 coins per credit, so 4 quarters per game, meaning $2 for a full game, multiplied by 27 teams at the time, that comes out to $54 to completion. Minimum.
Nobody said there'd be math!
Yeah, you'd be better off saving the title run for one of the home ports. And given the popularity of the game in arcades, there were lots of ports. But there were other good things about the game too, aside from keeping track of player stats. There were plenty of cheat codes for the game. You could enter them on the matchup screen and unlock enhanced stats, big head mode, and more. There were also several members of the staff as hidden characters. That made things more fun too. Thanks to its fun and engrossing gameplay and addictive replay value, NBA Jam became the highest grossing arcade game ever in the US as of 1994, grossing over $1 billion over its first 12 months. Obviously, Midway wouldn't want to sit on its laurels, right? But as I've stated before, this was before the internet hit the mainstream and people could just update games on the fly. To make an updated version required a new title. So, just under 2 years later, NBA Jam Tournament Edition was released with an updated roster for the 94-95 season. But that's not all they added. For one thing, composer John Hay wrote a new soundtrack for the game with all new music. More importantly, though, is that there was more depth to the players. Teams now had 3 players to select from, with the exception of a special rookie team which had 5, and you can make substitutions after every quarter. Hello, postscript writing me with a bit of an adjustment. It seems you can only make substitutions between quarters in the console versions. In the arcade versions, you can only make a substitution at the half. Just thought I'd drop that in there. The players also had more categories for stats, so you'd get a better idea of how each player performs. And on top of that, there was a lot more hidden stuff. There's at least 3 times the hidden characters, and there were several new cheats, including a tournament mode that turned off computer assistance. The home versions had even more hidden features like hotspots that awarded bonus points. Fun fact, early versions of TE had even more secret characters, including Raiden, Sub-Zero, and Reptile from Mortal Kombat. There was even a code for fatalities. But those characters and the fatalities were removed from the final version of the game at the request of the NBA. Because who needs violence in basketball? Oh, wait. Okay, we're about to hit the point where things got a bit complicated. So the story goes like this. After the release of TE, Acclaim, the publishers of the home console ports, acquired the rights to the NBA Jam name. The first Jam game they published under this name was NBA Jam Extreme in 1996. The game was developed for the ZN1 arcade board and, well, you can tell this was a product of its time. 3D games were just starting to hit their stride with games like Mario 64 and Crash Bandicoot. The bandwagon was just taking off, and Acclaim wanted a window seat before they were all taken. And of course, they wanted more spectacle, including signing the aforementioned Marv Albert to be the announcer. The major new mechanic in this version was the Extreme button, which was essentially a souped-up turbo button which allowed flashier moves but used up the meter faster than usual. Aside from the roster, the main advancements were superficial. Instant replays were cool, but the occasional Jumbotron bits were largely unnecessary. Not to mention, the camera could get a bit unwieldy. This game just honestly lacked the feel and polish that made the original Jam so beloved, and as a result, it didn't see the same success. After this, Acclaim would continue to make jam games for consoles, leaning more and more towards simulation-style games, with one last arcade-style game in 2003 on PS2 and Xbox, before Acclaim went under the following year. That would be the final NBA Jam game until 2010, when the NBA Jam name was picked up by... Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice, at Midway, the gang were continuing to refine the trail that they had blazed themselves, sticking to 2D with their competing game, NBA Hang Time, which turned out to be the true successor to Jam TE. It was released in 1996, same as Extreme, but actually released earlier that year. And the new ideas that Hang Time brought to the table had more substance to them than Extreme did, starting with the ability to create your own player. You could tweak their attributes in any way you wanted, as long as you had enough stat points, which you could earn from winning games. In a way, it felt like a little bit of RPG elements in a basketball game. Last place you'd expect to find them, but here we were. The gameplay itself was also expanded, with techniques like spin moves, alley-oops, and the double dunk, where a player could pass to a teammate in the middle of a dunk to make a dunk themselves. Alley-oops and double dunks could even play into the especially rare Team Fire, which powers up both team members. Achieving this rare feat would really give you an edge against the game's 29 teams. This was from the 95-96 season when the Grizzlies, originally from Vancouver, and the Raptors entered the league. The teams now had 5 players each to choose from, and oh hey, I actually recognized the players on the Bucks roster this time! And of course, there were more secrets this time, including new combination codes. Remember MK3 and those combat codes? Yeah, it's basically that. Another thing that came with early versions of the game, as well as the home ports, was a trivia contest. In the arcade version, you built up points towards a prize drawing, while in the home versions, this was another way to build up stat points for custom players. On top of all these new bells and whistles, the graphics looked sharper, the music was still catchy, and the commentary, this time provided by former Bulls TV announcer Bill Funk, continued to add flavor to the game. Between this and Acclaim's effort, I'd take Hang Time over Extreme, honestly. Plus, there was an upgraded version called NBA Maximum Hang Time released later in the game's life cycle, with updated rosters and additional secrets. The ending of Maximum Hang Time, however, teased that the next game would have a whole new dimension. A third dimension! Not sure who expected it to be a third dimension of licensing deals. Enter NBA Showtime, NBA on NBC. Yeah, Midway wasn't satisfied with just having a deal with the NBA. They saw how NBC was presenting it at the time and saw even more money. So they made a deal with them to use the name of their pregame show for their next NBA arcade title. They even got the iconic theme, Round Ball Rock, which plays during the team selection. The game was released in 1999, both as a standalone and as part of a 2-game sports station with NFL Blitz 2000, which was basically the football equivalent to Jam. This was the first Midway basketball game to feature 3D graphics, which were smoother than Extreme's graphics were, not to mention the camera was also better. Tim Kitzrow returned as the announcer with a slew of all-new clips. Beyond that though, most of the gameplay remained largely unchanged from Hang Time. Oh, wait, there was something else. This was the first b-ball from Midway to implement fouls and free throws. The one thing that changed from Hang Time in terms of gameplay, and it's something that ran counter to the style of the whole series. Nice job, Midway. Nice job. Granted, such fouls were rare, but the fact that they were implemented in the game at all wasn't exactly kosher like salt. This would be the last arcade b-ball game that Midway would make. After this, they would move strictly to consoles with NBA Hoops in 2001, followed by a series of streetball games known as NBA Ballers, prior to the buyout of the company in 2009 by WB Games. But hey, they had a good run while it lasted. NBA Jam was a super hit for a reason back in the day. Its super exaggerated physics and simplified arcade-style gameplay made it a title that anyone who could pick up a basketball could pick up and play. And thanks to its titanic success, it ended up laying the foundation for many arcade-style sports games to come, both basketball or otherwise. NFL Blitz was one example with 30-yard downs, no penalties, and monster tackles. Hockey games on console by Midway also followed suit, with games like Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey and NHL Hits. Midway even got in on baseball with MLB Slugfest, all of them focusing less on realism and more on action. Just the way I like it. I never could get into studying playbooks and managing teams and all that. Just let me play and I'm good. And it's not like simulations really worked all that well in arcade games to begin with. You really need to be simple enough not to confuse your players, because the last thing you want to do is make people think that they're wasting their time. Which is why, for instance, I'd take a reboot of Super Mario Strikers over EA's copy-paste FIFA racket. I just wish the NBA Jam name was in better hands right now. I'm the Quarter Guy, and until next time, Bucks in 6! Hey everyone, QG here. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share the video around. Feel free to check out my Twitter and my Twitch streams, and consider supporting me through Patreon and donating to my Extra Life campaign to support Children's Wisconsin. Thanks for watching.